In this lesson, we'll cover some special effects that are a part of DesignR PRO 2. These effects will include inline and outline, the stencil tool, shadows, metamorphosis, distortions, transforming objects, and others. Let's start with the outline tool. Essentially what this tool does is outline or inline selected objects with a contoured line path. To place an outline around this star object, we select the star, click on the Transform pull-down menu, and then select Outline. In the Smart Bar, we are given a choice of forming an outline, which will form a contouring line outside the star, and inline, which will form a contouring line inside the star. Both choices have the same type of settings that will affect the shape of the inline or outline. Therefore, let's use the outline to explain the different values and features in settings, and disable the inline settings for right now. The first value will adjust the thickness of the outline. As the number increases, it gives the outline a thicker look. The number below the thick value is the number of outlines. Right now, let's set it to the value of 2. This value here is the distance or spacing between the newly formed outline and the original shape. Or it will adjust the distance between the outlines themselves if there is more than one. Keep in mind that the number of outlines has to be 2 or greater prior to the distance value becoming active. By increasing the outline count number, it can give a nice effect to the object. Notice too that as this number increases, it will alternate between the outline color and empty space. Over here are choices of corner types, whether we want sharp, cut off, or rounded. Then finally we can select the color of the outline that we want here. Here in the workspace are 2 circles that are outlined in a way that the outlines are overlapping one another. This demonstration will help us understand the function of this button, Create Mask. This option, when pressed or enabled, will clean up any overlaps created by the newly formed outlines by automatically welding the overlapping outlines. Let's click Close, and there it is. If Fills is turned off, we can see exactly what's happened. Notice that all the outlines are welded together. The next tool or effect is the Shadow tool. This is an effect that can be adjusted from both the Smart Bar and the workspace. Let's demonstrate this by selecting the text on the screen. We'll click on the Transform pull-down menu once again, and then click Shadows. In the Smart Bar, as expected, are all the settings for how the shadow should look. On the left side, there are 4 types of shadows: block, perspective, drop, and cast. Let's select the block shadow first. Once a shadow type is chosen, always look at the object. The shadow effect will not appear until we enter some values or adjust the shadow by using the grab handles. We found it best to form the shadow by using the grab handles. The grab handle that we want to adjust is the one in the shape of a circle. This will adjust the position of the shadow. When we click and drag this handle, the shadow starts to appear. We can either shape it visually or adjust the values in the Smart Bar. Let's examine the settings for a moment. First is the color of the shadow. Next is the X and Y position of the shadow, which is then followed by the angle. The angle is the direction the shadow lays from the object, which will affect the X and Y position, and vice versa. Next is the depth, which is the distance the shadow is from the object. The outline options will thicken the outline so it creates a heavier shadow effect. Below the outline options are the types of corners we would like on our outline. What's nice is that these settings can be used for most of the other shadows. The perspective shadow, on the other hand, has one other value, which is cast. The furthest portion of the shadow is a percentage of the shape size, as indicated by the cast value. To demonstrate this, if the cast value is set to 50, then the vanishing point size of the shadow will be 50% smaller than the original shape size. To have the shadow extend to an actual vanishing pinpoint, then we set the cast value to 100%. Finally, when the outline is enabled by the check mark, this triangle becomes active, and this will place a relief shadow. In other words, it will place a gap between the object and its shadow based upon the thickness value here. The transformation tool will apply special effects and distortions to selected objects or text. It sort of bends the objects or text into a certain mold. First, let's select the text in the crosshatch pattern. We're using this crosshatch pattern behind the text to help us understand and see how each distortion affects the object. Under the Transform pull-down menu, select Transformation. In the Smart Bar, there are different types of transformations we can use. The first group in here is called the Bounding Box Transforms. The second group is the Perspective Transforms. The third group is where objects are made to fit into a certain shape, whether a globe shape, a cylinder shape, a flag shape, or a circle shape. We'll just demonstrate a couple of these to see how they can be adjusted. First, we'll select Bounding Box Linear Vertical out of the first group. This transformation will place a fold vertically in the selected objects. For this transformation, we are given several grab handles to manipulate the transformation. By grabbing any one of these, we can distort or shape the way we want the object to look. If we get to the point where we've made some transformations and distortions, but we want to start over, here is a reset button we can use to put the object back into its original shape. Let's do that. Let's try out another distortion tool, the Perspective Arch Horizontal, in the second group of Perspective Transforms. In this one, we can literally squeeze the middle of the objects. First, we can drag this grab handle, move it inwards or outwards. And then the second handle, we can grab and move that as well. There's a little trick to this to keep things in proportion. Let's reset the object and try it again. But this time, if the Control key is held down and we grab one of the handles and start moving it, notice how both sides move in unison to maintain a uniform shape. Let's reset again, and this time hold down the Shift key and move a handle. Notice that both handles move together, whether we're going to the left or to the right. Keep in mind that as you work with the different transforms, take note of how the Control key and the Shift key can help in creating a more uniform look. To show this, let's press Reset. And now we can choose another tool, the Perspective Linear Vertical. This time, if we grab one handle on this one side, we can move it down or up. Let's click Reset again, and this time we'll hold the Control key. And now when we move it, both corners will move inward evenly or outward evenly. Let's click on Reset. If we hold the Shift key this time, then once again both points move together in the same direction, whether it be up or down. So keep an eye out on how you can use the Shift and Control keys when moving the points evenly. What you might want to do on your own time is to experiment with each of these different transformations or distortions to see how a shape can be manipulated. The Metamorphosis tool is another special effect that can give your designs a nice effect. Basically, it creates multiple intermediary shape transformations from one shape to the other. The transformation takes into account the shape of the two original objects, their colors, and the colors of any thick lines that might have been applied to the objects. To demonstrate, let's take this circle and star. We'll select the two objects, and then click on the Transform pull-down menu. then click Metamorphosis. A window will appear asking us to choose the mode. The mode options determine how the colors will be assigned to the intermediate shapes in between the two objects. Let's go through each of these. The Target Layer option causes the intermediate shapes in between the two main shapes to be assigned to the currently selected color in the job palette. The Match Layers option causes the intermediate shapes to be assigned transitional colors. The New Layers option gives us more of a gradient effect. What it does is it basically takes the intermediate shapes and assigns them a color based upon their position, but they're using the same colors as the original two shapes. If it creates a new color because of going from one transition to another, it will assign that color into the job palette. Count is the number of transitional steps between the two objects, and Group All will group the resulting intermediate shapes. These selections will perform differently depending on the order of the objects. Let's click on New Layer and set the count to 25, then click OK. Let's undo the action and then place the circle in front, and this is done by selecting the circle and then pressing Ctrl F. Let's also change the outline to yellow so we can see the transformation a little better. Let's select both objects again, click on the Transform pull-down menu, and then Metamorphosis. We'll keep the same settings and click OK. And the circle comes to the forefront, so to speak. This is a really nice effect when trying to emphasize a message. For instance, just above the shapes, this text is advertising a sale. Let's use Metamorphosis to really enhance this message. First, we'll click on the text and make a copy by pressing Ctrl D. Then change the color to yellow and resize it to a smaller size. We'll move it just under the larger text. We could use the alignment feature in this case, but for right now we'll just approximate where it should be centered. Next, we need to make the larger text be in the forefront of the two. Let's select it, and then press Ctrl F to bring it to the front. Let's select both objects. Click on the Transform pull-down menu, and select Metamorphosis again. We'll select New Layers, uncheck the Group All, and you'll see why we did this in just a minute. Let's keep the count to 25. Finally, click on OK. In this metamorphosis, notice that we achieve the effect that we want, but the larger text is lost in the mesh of the effect. To make it stand out, let's select it and then change the color to yellow. That's why we kept it ungrouped. There we are. Keep in mind that the biggest mistake users have is remembering to set the objects in the correct order. Make sure that the object that is to be emphasized is placed in front. The next effect is the stencil tool. It is used to apply a clipping style to one or more selected shapes. The tool removes bands from the objects, creating a striping effect. Unlike other special effect tools that we have been using, the stencil tool is found under the Shapes Flyout toolbar. Here is a simple design. The goal is to have the background look like a rising sun. The text is placed on a separate layer, so let's turn it off by holding the Control key and then clicking on the text layer. This way we can work solely on the circle. What you don't see is another yellow half circle that is behind the red half circle. Since you can't see it, let's turn this layer off as well. Now this leaves us the red half circle to work on. Let's select the half circle and click on the stencil tool. We're given some settings in the smart bar and some funny looking grab handles. Let's take a closer look at the different types of stencils. If you look at the buttons, they will indicate the type of stencils. Here are the horizontal stripes, vertical stripes, square concentric, circle concentric, and conical stencils. Let's click on the horizontal stripes. In the Smart Bar, there are these two check marks. Constant, where the striped spacing are the same width, and variable, where the stripes can have a variable setting. Now that we know the different patterns, let's select the one that will suit the goal in this design. The pattern we will select is the conical pattern. We can start adjusting the stencil. First, we want to thicken the rays. Let's also increase the number of rays to 30 for a better effect. As you can see, the rays are a little off kilter. To remedy this, we can take this grab handle here and rotate the whole thing, so that it's perfectly horizontal on the bottom. By the way, all these grab handles, as with a lot of the tools that we've been working with, can be adjusted in the Smart Bar, but in this case it's usually better to do it visually, especially when trying to get a certain effect that is visually pleasing. Now we click Close, and the stencil is completed. The next task is to have a smaller half circle representing the sun at the origin of the rays. This will give the illusion of a rising sun. So let's click the Circle tool and draw a circle. Next is to slice the circle in half by using the Ginsu knife. To be accurate, let's right-click on the side ruler to create a guideline that we can follow, and drag it down into the middle of the circle. And then click on the closed-shaped Ginsu knife and click on the guideline on one side of the circle. Then click on the guideline on the other side of the circle. Then press the spacebar to end the cutting. We can take the selector tool and click on the outside of the circle to deselect it. And then click on the bottom half of the circle and delete it. Let's move the remaining half circle into place at the origin of the sun ray stencil. If we turn off fills, notice the jumble of lines here. If this were to be cut on vinyl, it would be very difficult. To clean this up, we'll select all the objects, click on the Weld tool, and weld the objects together. Let's show the text and background by holding the Control key, clicking on the text layer, and then the yellow sun layer. As you can see, the sun and the rays are on top of the text. To remedy this, we could just deselect everything and try to select the text only, but in this case it's hard to select the text. Therefore, why don't we just hold the Shift key down and click on the text layer plate below. This will select only the text itself, because it's on that layer. Now we can press Ctrl F to place it in front, and there we have it, a beautiful graphic of a rising sun. The next tool or effect that we'll discuss is the chisel effect. Here on the screen is text, and we want to give it a chiseled look. Therefore, let's select it, click on the Transform pull-down menu, then Chisel Effect. What iDesigner does is show the effect on the first letter, so don't panic if you only see one letter when working with this effect. That's just the way it works. If you don't see any effect, go ahead and click on the light color checkmark and the shadow color checkmark. So let's zoom in on that first letter so we can get a better view of the effect. At the top are the control settings. We can get a better idea of what each setting controls by watching the effect it creates. Let's start with the light color. Currently it's red. Let's change it to a lighter color. Right now it looks a little drastic. The shadow needs to be lightened up a little. Let's change it to an orange. If we pan over the Smart Bar, there are these two buttons. They affect the look of the chisel right where the two colors meet, going from the light color to the shadow. Clicking on Sharp will square off the shadow. This is the setting that we'll use, as opposed to the rounded look, which places a rounded end. Now just to the right of the button is this light source direction. Currently it's set so the light is coming from the upper right quadrant. This can be changed where it will affect the highlight. Right now, let's keep this in the upper right quadrant. At the right are the check marks for Boundary Optimization and Keep Original. Boundary Optimization will straighten out the lines where they intersect. Keep Original is just that. It will keep the original and make the new copy with a chiseled look. Otherwise, the chiseled version will replace the original. Going back to the left side of the smart bar, this check mark will give a beveled look to the object. All we see is this sliver of the chisel. That's because the bevel option leaves a plateau look to the chisel. To show this, if that value is increased, the bevel starts to decrease in thickness, and the plateau is more defined. Now we can click on the color to give that plateau a different look. To distinguish it, let's give it a color of a dark red. The last setting is the ridge color. This is the area between the bevel and the plateau. Let's check it and set the width to 0.2. Let's set the color of the ridge to white and click Apply. We can zoom out and see the total effect on the rest of the letters.